telling people you need to go and stock up on food because people are going to wake up, and they are waking up. I just put a blog post at foodstoragefeast.com. I think it was something like food shortages are now common knowledge. And that's dangerous because when the masses realize, holy crap, and they flood to those stores, it's kind of game over for people. So you really need to start taking this seriously because, if you don't see it now, I don't know, maybe you'll never see it. So I think this summer, as we get towards the summer, it really gets scary for a lot of people when they realize, hey, this is for real.
Had so much positive feedback last time Keith Snow and myself talked that, we thought it was appropriate to come on now with the Tonga eruption, food prices continuing, inflation not being transitory, a lot of things disappearing out of, let's say, the shelves that we're seeing across supermarkets. And then The Economist magazine now coming out with something called the shortage economy, quote unquote. So where does that leave us with, ability to feed ourselves, our families, and, get through this in a way that we all still have things that we like to eat? You're going to have to be thinking more regional produce during seasons versus having things shipped in. Just our availability for foods is going to, change a little bit. And we talked about this in our last, go around, that things were going to change. And this is before all these changes. So Keith running foodstoragefeast.com. We're going to talk about that today as well. So just different ways that you might be able to delve into food preparations. And it's an art, it's a science, and it takes a little bit of time to, become more comfortable cooking foods and the kind of foods that the combinations go together that you might not have thought of before. We're going to discuss a few of these issues, especially more of these root vegetables that a lot of people see in the markets, but they're not sure what to do with. The way they had done in many times past, above ground crops are going to have more difficulty with the hail, the wind, the freezes, but below ground tuber type crops definitely are going to be the staple. I mean, they're still staples across an enormous amount of the world, from cassava to taro to the potatoes, and it keeps going on down the list there. So Keith, I appreciate you joining me today. I know there's a lot to talk about, so we're just going to play tennis with some ideas, and everybody really, really enjoyed the quality information given last time on getting our families ready and just mentally framing it that, the foods you have around you can prepare into healthy, delicious foods that can keep family or community going.
Well, it's good to be with you, David. And I say for sure, all the things you just said are important to keep our eyes on and to keep focused on. And I'll go back to what I said in our previous interview, is I've been listening and watching some of your work now for years, and it sounded very legitimate. And, I did do some of my own research as well. And it seems, I want to say slowly but surely, these things are coming true, but it's actually quicker than that. And the pace of which we're starting to see these shortages. Everyone knows about toilet paper shortages during the quote unquote pandemic earlier in 2020. And I know it was probably in the summer of 2020 that we started worrying about crop shortages and price increases. And I've talked to people because I'm in the industry, and I was seeing a lot of things on the producer side, and people just see what it costs in the store, but the increases hit the producers first. For instance, I'll just hold this up as an example. It's just sitting on my dining room table. This is a product that I produce. It's a Parmesan cheese substitute, and it's out on Amazon. And having the ability to package that has been extremely difficult because we're not in the position to where we can order, tractor trailer loads of the packaging. So we're buying, cases and cases and cases. Like we'll probably make, 1,800, 2,000 jars of this stuff at a time. But it's become so difficult and so expensive to get the ingredients. And these are on the wholesale market. Now, the one thing that I do is I use ingredients that are just produced in the United States. That helps to alleviate the whole California port situation. But it's becoming so much more expensive. They're raising prices on the producers, that producer price index going up, up, up. And, eventually these things have to get passed off to the consumer. Now, 2022 is going to be the year. We were seeing it in 2021, but it's really starting to increase now. And a lot of these big CEOs have come out and they said, we can't eat it forever. And, how much of this is manufactured? I don't know. But it seems like all these big companies that are raising prices, they all have a fake meat or a plant-based substitute for us to eat. Now, I just held up something that was plant-based, but it's basically nuts and spices. Now, these plant-based foods that they have, like you just heard recently that KFC has a Beyond Chicken thing. If you look at the ingredients, and having worked in the industry and having customers that wanted some of these vegan things, you look at the packaging on there, and there's 60 ingredients in there, and just about all the ones that are monocrops are GMO grown. They're sprayed with pesticides. So it just seems like these big companies, they all have one goal in mind, and that's to kind of make meat usage a luxury and not something that we can all afford now. Just a little, I'm in southern Utah, and I don't buy a ton of deli meats, but I bought some roast beef recently, $16 a pound. So it's just, the numbers are here, and I think people really need to take their food budget and the entire process of feeding their family, and they need to be more strategic about it, because eventually the costs are going to get to the point where you'll be forced to do it, and you don't want to be, behind the toilet paper shortage. So preparing and using some of the things that we teach over at foodstoragefeast.com and purchasing some reserve food, I think is getting more and more important, literally week to week. I see so many increases in things that we store here at the house, and I constantly keep buying things, and I just remark, well, last time I bought that, it was $1.50 less, and $1.50 is not a lot. But when you look at across the board, your expenditures for food, it's going to really hurt a lot of families.
Yeah. Now buy 200 items that have risen $1.50 each. That's where math works. And that's where people understand the math. Yeah. 50-cent rise on a can of soup. Okay. Now go buy a case, and you're buying 12 cans times 50 cents. That's $6 more than it was. And then if you do the math, you're like, wait, how many cans did that used to be? Like, they stole 3 cans from me out of the box, literally. And the farm inputs, what we're looking at with the herbicide shortages is one thing, but the fertilizer shortages are another, a couple different facets there. And at the same time, they're using Roundup to kill off any weeds that would be in competition for those same nutrients in the soil for those crops. Now, since there's not enough, and they're already talking shortages of Roundup, specifically glyphosate, that I'm not a fan of, but I do know it's a 1-to-1 ratio for fertilizer to percentage of yield decline, and approximately the same for the herbicides. That's counting you're spraying in the rows so the weeds don't come up, which we consider food at times too. If you wild forage, those plants coming up in the fields between the rows of corn, for example, many of them are edibles, especially the amaranth varieties, which really like to spread through fields. And you start to do all the math on this, on percentage, how many bushels per acre decline on the weeds, how many acres are going to be taken offline where farmers won't plant. It's just going to be too expensive because they can't get the fertilizer to run their crops. So they'll prevent plant insurance. And it just seems to be this cascade of things adding on top of. And then we come down to the regular, supply chain issues. Now we have Canada and America here. I think it's even on the 23rd saying if your drivers aren't vaxxed, you can't deliver. So they're looking at a 25 to 30% reduction in, truck traffic across the borders, anything rig based, like you're talking 18-wheeler. Everywhere you look, it seems like, and then we got the port blockages, and you just wonder how much of this is truly organic, no pun intended, and then how much of it is manufactured, because I can't believe all these things are happening at the exact same time. And then the caveat was the reduction and shut off of pipelines that supplied natural gas into the ammonia to produce ammonia and different types of anhydrous fertilizers, urea, and these sort of thing. That all got cut off at the knees on purpose. Those were mandates to shut the pipelines, to reduce oil production. The hurricane hit that one largest ammonia producing plant in the United States. And it just seems like there's so many things that have been man-made in this catastrophe versus natural. So I don't know where you sit with that, or, is it too woo-woo to think and try to connect these dots? Because that's all I do is do a video about a certain set of circumstances. And I'm like, wait, that directly relates to this one. And whoa, it relates to that one. And if you start drawing them across, you get a full-on web of, wait, these are all interconnected here, all of it. And where does it boil down to? What's the final common denominator? Food pricing, your availability to food, and what governments can do to put you in a corner if you have no access to food.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. And I guess if you want to round it all up into one little snowball, this is the Great Reset in action. You can clearly see what's happening. So they're using this Great Reset. And think of it like this. Just imagine we're all cattle in a field. The other day, I think about this stuff too much because it does raise my blood pressure. But think about us being, happy cattle grazing in a field. It's sunny. There's beautiful grass. We're biting here and there. It's a huge field, 100, 200 acres. But off in the distance, somebody comes up and puts a cattle gate, a panel, 12-foot panel, one. The cow can still move wherever he wants. That's not a problem. Then on the other side, another one goes in. But the cattle are still free. They can walk wherever they want. And slowly but surely, there's a fence built around them. And all of a sudden, that fence just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And this is ultimately what's happening to us as people. And it's only going to be great for them. It's not going to be great for you and I. And you were saying, connecting the dots between all these things. Initially, in 2020, 2019, 2018, we were just talking about as this sun activity gets lower and lower, that the crop growing regions would get smaller and smaller, kind of like the analogy I just did with the cows and the gates. So you start to shave off 2 or 3% of your grow zones, in addition to having jet streams that are completely unreliable, and all these polar vortexes and all this kind of stuff happening. More and more things go wrong with your food growing. And then as you move into 2020, now you've got a health emergency. So these type of things can get out of hand quickly, but they all these dots, just like you very smartly indicated, they're all connected. And what all of them eventually do is limit our availability to food, everything that we need to live. And you can see when last year we were just worried, okay, well, people are not working at the food factories or whatever. They have COVID, so they're out, the production's down. Oh, there'll be a little less chicken. Chicken, having been in the industry, we used to buy 25 pounds of chicken wings, for $30. Now it's like $140 to buy the same thing. These have real effects. And again, at first it was just, employee shortages, but now it's supply chain issues. And then all of a sudden we have, like you said, all these crises with energy. And this really, this is a great focus point if people really think. Energy is so tied into everything we do. It's not just whether you drive a Tesla or whether you drive a V8. That's not it. The cost of energy directly relates to the cost of fertilizer, which directly relates to the cost of food for farmers' inputs. And it's getting to the point where it's untenable for many small to mid-sized farmers because, input costs are always a pain in the neck for farmers. And they've all been, again, herded into this system where they're relying on big corporations, Monsanto, Bayer, Syngenta, whoever it might be, getting their seeds and their sprays and all this type of stuff. Then they're selling it into a system where they don't control the prices. And eventually, the only thing they control is their land. Most of them will have banknotes on them, but the rest of their expenses, their inputs, it's kind of out of their hands. They have no control of it. And as a business owner, and that's what a farmer is, that's a scary prospect. And that's why, with this product here, I've treaded very slowly because I don't have enough capital to, do huge commodity buys and contracts on all the ingredients and packaging. So I'm at the whim of the market. And that's the same thing that farmers have. There was a guy, and I think I saw it on Christian's channel at iceagefarmer.com. there was a big corn grower, and I think, don't quote me on the numbers, but last year's inputs like 86,000. This year's inputs, same acreage, same crops, all that, like over 170,000. Now, that is going to knock out most of the small and mid-sized farmers. They just don't have the capital to do that. And at some point, when you have also a real estate sort of boom, which is all artificial, when you have people running away from blue states into red states, running from cities to avoid riots and crime, which is on the rise, to get out to the country, you see the price of land elevating. It is not going to take much for these farmers to say, wait a minute, I either go bankrupt on inputs or I sell off the farm so they can put in condos. And this is happening everywhere, and you can see it. I'm looking at land in your state right now, I always look at the satellite view, and oftentimes you'll see this, great 15, 20, 30 acre piece of land. But when you start looking at it on the satellite, right across the street are housing developments. And it's so unnatural, it's artificial just to plop down, plow in a road and put in 150, 200 homes. That's just not what used to happen, but it's going to increase. But as you said, all these dots connect, everything gets more expensive. And ultimately, it's the food that gets harder and harder to afford, harder and harder to find. And it's the average people, it's the middle class. And that's what really, if you think about America, what's great about this country. We've always had a strong middle class. Other countries, you have rich and poor, and that's really it. And they like it that way because the rich make the rules, the poor live under the rules. But as you can see, when you have this type of price inflation, the middle class of America is really getting squeezed. And it's sad to see. And the decline of the country is really going fast, but ultimately it comes down to the food, because we have to feed our families. I mean, as a father of 3 children, that's a responsibility I don't take lightly. So every time I go to the store, David, I come back with what I went to the store for, but other things to put in the pantry. From seed oils, because I know those are going up. And I don't use canola or any of the cheap oils, but it's all olive oil. That's really not, it's a fruit oil, but I buy olive oil. I'll buy condensed milk. I'll buy cans of tuna fish. I'll buy cans of roast beef, canned butter, all that kind of stuff. Every time I go out, I buy ingredients, and they're usually things that store for a good amount of time that can be made into inexpensive meals, because we're not poor people, but it's getting crazy expensive to feed our family in the way that we're used to. I mean, I bought a ham, and it's about the size of a softball. I bought this ham yesterday, and it was 2 pounds. I think it's $25 for it. And I bought it because we have some family coming in. But I was talking to the clerk as I checked out. I said, "Man, this stuff's getting expensive." She says everyone coming through the line is commenting on how crazy it is. So I think we're in some trouble, and I think it's very important for people to learn how to limit their expenses. Now, in the back there, you can see my kitchen, and if you think about it, the kitchen is, I think, the heart of the house, and that's where all the food comes in, gets cooked, and go out. That's a big expense. It's a major expense for our family. And people really need to wake up, because just like I remember telling somebody at work, and I don't know, maybe it was February, that this health emergency was coming from China to America and it was going to affect our business. And they laughed at me, but a couple of weeks later we were shut down. Also, I told those people, you better go out and get some toilet paper. What are you talking about? I said, yeah, there's hardly any out there. I'm sure they weren't wiping their tail end on leaves, but I'm telling people, you need to go and stock up on food, because people are going to wake up, and they are waking up. I just put a blog post at foodstoragefeast.com. I think it was something like food shortages are now common knowledge. And that's dangerous, because when the masses realize, holy crap, and they flood to those stores, it's kind of game over for people. So you really need to start taking this seriously, because if you don't see it now, I don't know, maybe you'll never see it.
Yeah, I want to ping back on the olive oil. Now, we use olive oil and avocado oil, flaxseed oil. But the problem was we were in a hurry when we were at Costco, and I was the one who said, let's get the olive oil. We got olive oil, which is 15% virgin oil mixed with other kind of olive oils. That was my mistake for not choosing only virgin olive oil. Now we can our own, and we do our own sun-dried tomatoes, so we need a lot of olive oil for that. So, we're getting different kinds of size jars to fill up with the oil, with the tomatoes, the garlic, the basil, and then let it sit for 6-8 weeks. But there's a huge difference between just quote unquote olive oil and extra virgin olive oil. So as you're going out to purchase that, and I've also found these cubes of lard, they look like, big sticks of butter. And if you're going to do any baking, like yesterday, we made something called drop cake. It was a recipe from 1914. Very different from what you're used to, but cooking in the old style, using the baking soda, the eggs, separating the egg whites and the yolks. It came out really, really thick. So then we put it in a bamboo steamer to give it some fluffiness. And then today, after it's set, putting it in the steamer, it really fluffed up into what you consider more like a sponge cake type thing. But, look in those old recipe books and see what our grandparents or great grandparents had cooked like. Those are the basic staples that you can use to make almost everything. Because I would tell you that book that we had, it must have only had 20 ingredients or something, or 25 ingredients to make everything in the cookbook from 1914. It wasn't like 60 ingredients like you speak of to do one dish, which is going to be, it's going to be difficult to keep that supply chain intact. So, what I'm noticing and also reading more and more about is anything that requires a huge amount of spices to go into the final finished product is disappearing first, because the manufacturers are having difficult time procuring all of these different ingredients. So one of the things would be those little packs that you have in instant noodles that you rip open and then you add to the soups to be able to flavor it. They're having trouble. They're almost at the end of their backlog of what they had already pre-produced that they had in extra storage to roll out. So, when you're coming, you're going to start to see more and more things that require more ingredients disappearing off the shelves. Cans of stew that have 15, 20, 30 things in them versus like cream of mushroom or something that has like 4 ingredients. Minus all the preservatives. So looking at the landscape, if you can see first where things are going to disappear, those things that have the most amount of ingredients, if that's something you like, need, and always use, target your spending there first. And extra virgin olive oil as well. You're looking at different periphery countries now as suppliers. It was Italy, it was Greece, Spain, but now you're getting something out of like Tunisia. Like, where did that come from? What do you mean this Algerian extra virgin olive oil? How did that appear suddenly? Like, where are they getting their sourcing from? Did they run out of something? And I was making a joke in one of the videos, being serious at it, knowing that buyers and supply chain managers are going to be moving to different countries of origin. And I said, if you see something coming from Eritrea, and that pops up on your store shelf, they are at the end and their backs are against the wall to get anything they can to buy anything to put it on the shelf. So when you're thinking about tiers of need for your stocks, what are the things that have the most ingredients, I would say? And maybe that would ring some bells, but please be careful with the olive oil, because I can definitely taste the huge difference in cooking quality, smoking temperature, and just, it feels oily. It doesn't feel like olive oil that we're used to. It feels like something else has been mixed into it other than, it says 15% extra virgin olive oil, but what's the other 85% of oil that's in there? They say olive oil, but you and I know exactly what that means. They could be any kind of scrubby olive oil that was squeezed out and added in there to make it look good. I don't know. There's a lot of things to think about, and freezing butters, freezing lard, freezing different oils. Oh, the duck fat and the goose fat. If you didn't have a chance to pick it up around Christmas, sorry, you got to wait until next year. Those kind of fats only come around the holiday seasons. And a lot of spices you can only find holiday season times too. Cardamom, yeah, you could go find it if you're really looking in like Whole Foods or something. Oh, by the way, which is New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, those store shelves are stripped bare. And you know what's left on the store shelves there in those states in the Whole Foods? The most expensive things. You were talking about the ham. Did a video yesterday. The only things that are left are the most outrageous, super 5-star, incredible high price things. Everybody else left that. So you can see exactly what's the highest price. That was what left on the shelf. But if you don't have a choice and there's a run in the stores, that's only what you're going to have is what you got in front of you. So do a little bit of early shopping. I don't know. So Keith, let me ask you, when do you think the awakening of most people will come? I am absolutely unequivocally saying a couple of things on a timeline for 2022. The COVID restrictions are lifting across the world in many, many places. Suddenly, it's like a tidal wave of lifting of restrictions. So that maybe will give everybody that breath, like you can't keep everybody in panic for so long. Pendulum over into the food scarcity from the fertilizer and then the pesticides, herbicides. But then I think the trump card is going to be the Tonga thing. Once they realize that global temperatures are going to drop approximately 1 degree Celsius, Southern Hemisphere maturation food crops right now aren't going to be as plentiful as they had counted from the forecasts. And then I think the spiral's coming this year. So what do you think the awakening time is going to be? And then how will people react to it?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. And I think it's by this summer coming up. So we're, towards the end of January. So another 5 months or so. And I think everybody's going to be awake. They're going to realize, holy crap, this is happening. And at that point, they're going to flood the stores. They're going to rush the shelves. And that's going to be a scary thing, because those type of panics, if you have a shortage and it creates a panic, you have a bigger shortage. And these things will really feed off each other. And that's scary. I mean, you don't want to be, on Food Storage Feast, we had this picture, and I think it was Walmart. And this was from, I don't know what year, it was a couple years ago, right before an ice storm or something. And the quote under the picture was like, you don't want to be fighting the zombies in Walmart for the last loaf of bread. And that's what it looked like. There was no bread. I don't go to Walmart often. I despise the place. But I went in there the other day to get something very specific, protein powder. And I just walked some of the shelves, and man, it was scarce, particularly in the perishable foods are very scarce. So I think this summer, as we get towards the summer, it really gets scary for a lot of people when they realize this is for real.